afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast today with me, your host, Imperial Dane, looking here at another build order for the Wehrmacht. In this case, one I've sort of found myself with more success with, generally, than the Tier 2 Rush, except when I'm playing versus the British. But basically, it is the 2 Grenadier, 2 MG42 builds, basically successfully building Grenadiers and MG42s, and you get 2 of each, supported by a single Pioneer squad. Basically, using the Grenadiers and MG42s to form up sort of fire teams that can sort of advance and support each other sort of roughly there across the battlefield. And generally, one of the elements of this strategy is, well, opening overall, since it's a bit of a sort of opening build order, a bit like, Tier 2 Russia back, just getting Pioneers and MG42s. This one also relies on MG42 to an extent, but I think much more aggressively relies on MG42s than the previous one. And also requires you to be a lot sharper with them, and overall, of course, keep units nearby. I mean, a lot of players tend to play the machine guns if they do aggressively, but without any support. GGS here basically you use the MG42 to sort of follow up on infantry in most cases. For example, in a big engagement here, you use the MG42 to then support the infantry you got there. That way you gain the upper hand through that. The trick there, of course, is again you have the infantry and pioneers whenever doing the fighting in front of the MG42. Then you move the MG42 in there to support, cover up flanks if necessary, but always just suppress the attackers that way, gaining the upper hand for your grenadiers. That's generally one I find sort of more useful with. And again, it very much relies again on working sort of two-man teams if possible. Again, with grenadiers MG42 or pioneers and MG42. Proper usage of it can do a lot of damage to your opponent. Can over again quickly push off a lot of American riflemen off the field. And overall also involves a bit of attack moving again with the MG42 again, knowing that yes, there's not going to be anything there again. So it does require a bit of tactical awareness as well, knowing when to attack moving again. The attack move is a bit necessary, mostly because you're still trying to manage a lot of things. So again, it does require again some understanding, because you don't want your MG42 unit to attack up in a poor position. But again, supporting an attack, it's quite fine. Defensively, obviously, you want to be more careful with it. But again, doing an attack, it doesn't matter so much as long as the bastards get suppressed. And again, it's the trick. Then further on, you also generally want to use incendiary armor piercing rounds. But as soon as you got the 2 Grenadiers, 2 MG42s, you try to tag up. Then usually either your Pioneers are back, or you get another Pioneer squad to then sort of tag up and go, for example, for a Pack 40 you're playing versus the Americans, having denied them a lot of resource, because you're then going to face a Steward in most cases, unless you see the Lieutenant. Otherwise, versus the Soldier, it's not a bad idea to, for example, go for 2-2s or Panzer Grenadiers fast. You can wait with a Pack 40, for example, there. An early half track can also be quite useful there for you as a player. But versus the Americans, you definitely want out a fast Pack 40, because usually if the American player is himself fast, he can usually have a Steward out very quickly as well, as you might notice here. Roughly by the same time, I have a Pack 40 out, and of course his Steward can quick much quickly to the front line compared to the Pack 40. And of course, that sort of highlights another thing that's partly, I think, essential to the strategy a bit there. I mean, you don't want to initially be spending munitions upgrading the Grenadiers. You generally want to try and lay down Tellermines here and there. For example, in this case, I use a Tellermine here in the road, bridge, or whatever you call it. Basically, on the assumption he's going to use the Steward to quickly deal with my harassing Pioneers, in which case the Tellermine here will deal with the Steward. But generally, just wanting to lay down some Stewards aggressively, again, slightly behind the front lines, so your opponent can't see what you're doing. But again, you just sort of roads will be travelled. That way, hopefully catching up a Steward or a T-70 or something like that. A bit risky, but again, laying down a few sort of well-travelled spots, you should generally have a good chance of that way catching up any light tanks. And then generally you get some Panzer Grenadiers, maybe a half track again, or maybe 2 Panzer Grenadiers. Depending on the situation, you can also go for a mortar, but otherwise the trick is then sort of light to medium sort of Tier 2 usage, and then you sort of try to take up for Tier 3, get out some medium armor. Depending on the situation, you can go for the Ostwind, the Stug, or the Panzer IV, though usually by this point, again, if you've dealt with the Steward with that, for example, thing, I mean, you can usually sort of go ahead for an Ostwind. You'll deal with the infantry more aggressively, utilizing the Ostwind. If there's still armor about there, get a Stug out, maybe a Panzer IV. Again, it depends a bit on the resource situation. Of course, you also want to be defending your own fuel points pretty decently. But again, a half-track can be a very sort of nice measure as part of this strategy again. Again, not necessarily something then again versus the Americans. It definitely only hits once the Steward is dead. The Steward can hard counter the half-track and turn it into a wasted investment in many cases. But otherwise, the half-track can give you much more strength on the battlefield and overall ensure you don't have to retreat as much, meaning you can overall pressure your opponent much more, in which case the half-track will quickly turn into a great investment. In particular versus Soviets, a quick half-track can help you establish further battlefield dominance over them, since again, unlike the Americans, they can't rush out a T-70 so easily. So again, in that regard, a half-track is a bit more workable than a, versus the Americans. But again, it's not really, something hugely necessary. But again, I do think it can add a lot there. It can again give Grant extra mobility, but overall just further maintain battlefield presence, which as the Wehrmacht is always a bit of a task again due to overall smaller unit sizes. The half-track really helps offset and of course allows a fit further aggression. But again, in many cases, you want to sort of be playing your MB42s a bit more aggressively, depending on the situation. Obviously, you can't keep pushing them forever, but, depending on the map size, again, how things are going, you generally want to use them aggressive support. Defensively, obviously, it's not a bad idea, for example, to have them covering each other, and, of course, keep the half-track nearby if necessary as well. Again, it depends on sort of the scenario. Again, if you're basically on the defense because you got most of the map, then there's not really much further to push onwards. Obviously, you sort of just place them where they're sort of necessary alongside the half-track, but sort of, again, if you have to attack, try to use the MB42 to support the attack, necessarily flank in on the attack, and of course use the half to sort of further get your men into a really good position, really aggressively, but also support your men during the attack. So, but again, overall, 2 Grenadiers, 2 MG42s, use the machine guns to support the early Grenadiers, Pioneers, push against the opponent, try to set up sort of advantageous positions, fortify them with sandbags, barbed wire if necessary, but otherwise lay down telemines to catch up any Stuarts or anything like that, and then sort of, go for Pack 40s at the same time. Panzer Grenadiers, or Stormtroopers assault rifles, I think, are sort of a key part of this, and you really can't go without them generally. I mean, you can of course go for Grenadiers light machine guns, but generally the Panzer Grenadiers just offer you better attack opportunities to feel over the Grenadiers light machine guns in the longer run. And again, half-track also works great with them. And then you sort of go for armor, again depending on the situation, Stug or Ostwind, maybe Panzer IV. And then of course if things are going really well, you just sort of kind of hunch about it, you can aim for say a Panther down the road. So I think that sort of largely covers here the sort of build order strategy. Again, well, it's more of a build order, slight strategy, I suppose. Again, it's sort of kind of just what the key units are. But if you can sort of get out with that, I think you can overall sort of perform quite well versus the Americans. I certainly find it performing much more reliably versus the Americans, in particular in the early game with the other strategy, can get hard countered. This one, again, thanks to good MG42 which can push back your opponent. But again, aggressive MG42s again, supporting the infantry. You do not send in the MG42 in its own ahead of everything else. You send it in supporting the rest, not ahead of the rest. Again, to do that, it's going to end up pretty poorly. But again, if you use it properly to support your men, you will perform reasonably well. So I think that sort of rather covers. Of course, further questions if there's something unclear in the video, you of course can ask in the comment section. I will try to answer, perhaps someone else will. And I also hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something from it, which is, primarily why I do the Propagandacast Lehr videos. If you did, subscribe, like, share, and comment on it. This is Imperial Dane signing off. Hope to see you all tomorrow or another time for another exciting video. This is Imperial Dane signing off. Cheers.